Welcome back to the lunch break. Week 4 of the apocalypse, or also known as the quarantine, the Wuhan virus, the Chinese virus, the coronavirus, and or the Kung flu. Wherever you land, I don't know, but it could be potentially the end of the world. And I used to be pre-trib, meaning God's going to come and get me out of here, although that's not really what pre-trib is. But I may be more mid post trib now, meaning this: I want to record the end of the world here for you. I want to record my final days because I have no bullets and I have no skills and I can't live off the land. So I would hope that somebody may see this video and, well, let me come to be part of their compound and live out my final days here on the earth waiting for the end as a martyr. I don't know that theology either, but it is the lunch break. And since I've been quarantined and have no friends, and I usually have lunch with friends, and we talk about the craziest of things because that's what good friends do. We just talk about everything from conspiracy theories all the way down to kingdom stuff to events of the day and, well, what we all think and or believe. And it makes for some interesting salsa conversation. But my friends aren't available because we've all been quarantined, and if we do, we're having to sneak. And I don't want to record the sneakiness. Not at all. So you're kind of stuck with me doing a lunch break talking about, well, conspiracy theory things, kingdom things. So I thought, why not open up a can this week to talk about some stuff that I just love? And it's the book of Genesis, creation versus evolution. And I've got about 8 minutes to do it, but I'll try to talk about it all week long. And here's the thought of the day: is the earth billions of years old, or is it young, meaning 6,000 years old? If we trace it all the way back to the beginning of Adam, the earth is only, well, 6,000 years old, but science says it's billions of years old with a capital B. Well, I go all the way back to 1983, 1984, when we hotly debated, is evolution true or is it not true? And then science and Christianity began to bump into one another. You had to pick which railroad track you wanted to ride on because you could not ride on both. You could not be a Christian and an evolutionist, or an evolutionist and a Christian. And therefore the train split and science went left and Christians went right. And we've been afraid of it ever since, until recently. There's a lot of YouTube videos. I would like to encourage all of you listen to my voice. The best theology out there is on YouTube. Find whichever one you like best, post it, share it. That's your faith. It's the best way to learn the Bible is on YouTube. And then maybe you could read the Bible later, but it's easier to do it off of YouTube. Let someone read it for you and tell you what to believe. It's the easiest way to go. Now, I go all the way back to that original debate, and I myself was kind of scratching my head. Is science true? Is science not true? Of course it's true. Then they find dinosaur bones that are billions of years old, but then we say, well, they're not billions of years old because carbon dating is fake and it's not done well. And now we're really on a roller coaster ride of, well, is science even true? Can I trust it? Well, the science say, of course you can trust it. It's based upon empirical fact. And then the Christians say, empirical fact? Absolutely not. It's nothing more than an unproven hypothesis. I mean, the whole theory of evolution is unfounded anyway, and it's just a hypothesis. It's a theory. You can't even prove it. You can't test it. It's round earth. It's flat earth. Oh, those are YouTube videos as well. If you want to dive down the rabbit hole, I would encourage that. I may even talk about that later. You're welcome. But is it old or young? So it's bothered me from 1983 until I decided, well, why am I even afraid? Let me just jump into the Bible, because if I can't even let the Bible say what the Bible says and believe it, well, then maybe God's not as big as we think he is. If science can really debunk God, then God really is not the creator, because you couldn't debunk the creator through science. You could only prove that the creator actually exists through science, not debunk the fact that he doesn't exist. Therefore, I would encourage you to watch more YouTube videos on that, because that too is a profound thought and it take you hours to go, but that's not the way I'm going. But I've gone that way and it's a fun roller coaster ride. But is it billions of years old? Well, based upon dinosaur bones, yes. And based upon the little guy that's sort of between a human and a monkey, yes. It's billions of years old. And based upon the stars that we can measure with a little ship that we've sent out in the universe to take pictures and send those pictures back to us from billions of light years away, yes, it's billions of years old. Or is it just, well, several thousand years old, dating all the way back to, well, Adam and Eve? Well, here's my thought. What if it's both? What if it's both young and it's both old? And we've just, well, only tried to assess that in the thinking of our own selves, which is within time as we know it. Here's a weird thought about Genesis. Time as we measure it, which is sun up to sundown, doesn't even come in till verse or day 4. In other words, God did not create the sun to rule the day, the moon to rule the night until verse 4, and says that those things will govern the seasons and the times, meaning that when God created the heaven and the earth, he could have done it from an eternal standpoint, not quite measuring time yet, at least time as we know it, maybe time as he knew it, which was morning and evening, which could be translated from obscurity to clarity. If you go study that out, it's rather interesting that every day of creation is really going from obscurity, darkness, evening, to clarity, morning or day. Every day starts a little more chaotic than the next, but by the end of the day, God says it's good, meaning it's more clear. But through the days, every new day is a little more obscure than the previous day, but will end more clear than it started. And that could be the translation as well of evening and morning, and maybe not a 24-hour period, because could that really be if the sun and moon don't come around until the 4th day? So that's really a strange thought, but have that thought, watch that YouTube video as well. You can thank me later on that one. But what if? What if that the eternal God created the heaven and the earth in verse 1, and it was billions of years measured by us, but not by God, because he's eternal. For God, it's just right now. For God that's eternal, who's not bound by time, he could have created the heavens and the earth, and those heavens and the earth could have existed for billions of years before he ever said, let there be light. Because here's the strange thing. In the 4 days or the 6 days of creation, days 1 through 3, the stuff is already here, which is strange. If you really study day 1 through 3, it's not as if God is creating it, is as if it's already here, created in verse 1, not in day 1, 2, and 3, but already made in verse 1, and he just sort of calls up. In other words, you never see on day 1 or 2 God created water. Water was already here based on Genesis 1:1. And then the strange thing, he doesn't even call up land. Land was already here. He doesn't create. He just calls it up and says, well, let the land come up out of the water. So the weird thing, in the days of creation, the water is already here. The earth, the dirt is already here. He just calls that up out of the water, which is rather strange. And the seeds of the grass and the trees are already here, because he just says, let the seeds just spring forth their own kind. So the strange thing is, in Genesis 1:1, when he created the heaven and the earth, that must have included water and trees and seeds and the earth and that, because the first 3 days of creation, I wonder if he's really creating anything, or if he's just calling it up out of obscurity, because it's already here. Could have been here for billions of years. It could have even have been inhabited by the angels. It could have been inhabited by Lucifer and his angels, which is a really strange thought, that God could have, Genesis 1:1, created the heavens and the earth, and Lucifer and his angels could have inhabited this, which is an interesting thought out of the book of Isaiah chapter 14 and the book of Jeremiah as well, that he could have inhabited the earth, because he said, let me ascend my throne above the clouds, which is a strange thought, assuming that he was on the earth with clouds, to assume his throne up into God's throne. That's a strange thought. But he is known as the Prince of Darkness, who covers the earth, and the God who blinds. So it's amazing by verse 2 that darkness covers the earth, and God is not darkness, he's light, which is strange that it covered the whole earth, because Lucifer is said to be a cherubim who covers the whole earth. He's a cherubim who covers, which is an interesting thought. Could it be that Genesis 1:1, the eternal God, created the heavens and the earth in an eternal state, meaning we're not really measuring time yet, because prophetically we've not started the prophetic journey, and that's something we're going to talk about tomorrow and Wednesday, is that God measures time prophetically, not just time like we measure sun up to sundown, and that is an interesting thought to ponder of how it could be so old. So I leave you with this. Genesis 1:1, the eternal God, not bound by time, not bound by a 24-hour period of sun up, sundown, because the sun and the moon aren't here until day 4, creates the heaven and the earth. The seeds of that are already here in verse 1 through 3. The water is already here. The ground is already here. The seeds are already here. Could it be that in some eternal past, God created the heaven and the earth as we see it created as a home for Lucifer, his angels, to bring worship to God, and then that cherubim, that angel created by God, decided to overthrow the throne of God. God judged him, cast him out of heaven. Lucifer, who's an anointed angel who covered the creation of God in darkness, because that's what he does. He's known to be a prince of darkness. He covered all of God's creation. And then God steps in and goes, okay, let's take this thing from obscurity to clarity, which again is the thought there. Is maybe not a 24-hour period of day 1, 2, 3, and 4 all the way to the sun and the moon as we would measure time, but from clarity, obscurity. Every morning is more clear than the evening of when we started the thing. So just ponder that today. It makes for a good salsa and chicken enchilada conversation. I'll jump in tomorrow and I'll just keep opening the can up to get you to think, is it young or is it old? I'll let you decide.